like we're really close.
We are. I consider you a friend. But there is something I could do that would make me like this a little bit more. Give me 1 second. I'll be right back. Huh? What do you think? Can I get my shirt? We're twinsies, officially.
That's what you want to do?
Yeah, man.
Bro, okay.
Brothers in spirit and in pocket tees, in gray Henley pocket tee, whatever, doesn't matter. So the title of this video is the 10 steps to building a container home. So I brought in, the expert on this. I have gone through this process several times, never being able to get it to the finish line. Kai has done this a handful of times, and you're working on a really crazy container build now. So this all came about from a last video that was actually posted on Kai's channel where we did a challenge of how, if you were a newbie, how we would invest $10, $60, and $250,000. And at the very end, we're like, what if we invested $250,000 to build the ultimate unique stay treehouse container home Airbnb? So these are gonna be the 10 steps that you're going to take to build your very first container home, fully permitted, fully by the book. So number 1,
location,
concept, and size. Okay? So these are the we call this LCS. It's a very common term in the container world that we just made up. LCS, location, meaning you sort of want to land on where you want to build this. I think there are some kind of implications that people have to take into consideration in terms of temperature, weather, elements, and everything like that. So can you speak to that?
100%. So a lot of times climate plays a major role because containers usually are built on site. Not all the time, which we'll talk a little bit later, where they'll actually have prefabbed ones and they just ship it to you ready to rock and roll. But in some cases, like my case, we build it all on site. Mm-hmm. And so we can't really cut or use welding tools or anything like that when it's raining 6 months out of the year where I'm at. So, and if it's snowing, it makes it even worse. Yep. But with that said, location is really big. It's really important because you want to factor in how you're gonna do the construction process, and then also how you're gonna insulate, how you do the roofing, the waterproofing, all that stuff. And so it also plays into the fact of the concept of it, because like we said, these are pretty much modular homes. So we can put them up in trees, we can put them on stilts, we can put we can bury them
cliffside.
Cliffside. There's a lot of things that
underground. I've always thought about doing an underground container home. Yeah. A bunker that is completely glass on the ceiling. Ooh. And then you like walk down and get in there and you can see like grass and shrubs like kind of over it. Just don't steal my idea, but yeah, I'm thinking about that.
That's a really
cool. I'm going to pitch that to you at the very end of this.
I like that. Okay. So anyways, when you have that concept, it really depends, because if you're building on rock, you can't do that bunker. If you're building in an area that's heavily sloped with a lot of trees, you might be doing it on pillars, and you probably will not be doing it on a flat perimeter foundation. So it really depends where you are buying that land and what you want to take advantage of.
Well, also it's going to have implications on your overall budget, but really all of these do, right? Concept. I mean, we just talked about a couple off the top of our head, doing a bunker. You're going to have the costs there to consider, like excavating so that you can actually lower that in there, doing a foundation that you're going to lower it into. The size is the other portion of this. Are you going to be building one 40-footer? You're going to be smashing two 40-footers together? You just want it to be a 20-footer? Do you want to start stacking? There's a lot of cost implications with really the location, concept, and size. And really you want to sort of land on this as, a general idea, I think, before getting started, because it's going to really determine if this thing is going to cost $150,000 or, $800,000.
Right. And just to let you know, the more containers that you do and the more fancy you get with it, there's more structural welds, more beams, more metal that you actually have to bring in to meet code. We'll talk more about that later.
Don't give away the good stuff yet, okay?
Sorry.
That's number 8. All right, stay tuned. We're going to get into it.
Number 2,
due diligence and permits.
Yep. So shipping containers in most counties, remember we have 3,006 counties in the United States. Don't know the rest of the world, sorry. But
that's a pretty good factoid to have off the top of your head, by the way.
3,006? I've done a lot of research.
Okay.
Yeah, 3,006. Typically, shipping containers are considered a prototype dwelling unit. It doesn't mean that's illegal or it's wrong or it's bad. It just means that's prototype. So what that means is that certain counties have certain permitting rules that you have to exceed code by. So in my personal county, I believe it's 20 or 25%. So for a normal stick-framed home, I have to be 25% better than whatever they do, or better than those because of that margin of error that they want in a prototype type of home. Think about boxable, any of these new modular homes that are coming out, they all have to meet the same requirements.
So another thing to note here is that if you call your county or your planning department or your building and safety, whoever, and you say that you want to build a container home, they will either laugh at you, or they'll say, oh, that's not allowed, or they'll just kind of like, not give you the time of day because they're like, oh my gosh, people always call us about container homes. And so you really want to dig into this and do a little bit of due diligence to just have an understanding if your county is familiar with the concept of a container home, because a lot of the times if they're not, you will be facing somewhat of an uphill battle to get this thing permitted. A lot of the times I don't even say I'm building a container home. When I'm calling and doing my due diligence, I say that I'm doing like a steel frame construction home, because the engineering will really, it'll clear up a lot of the ambiguities that maybe your plan checker or the person on the phone just may not know up front.
100%.
100%.
Word ninja. That's what you are.
Me?
Yeah. Number 3, utilities and access ways. Okay, so this is huge for any type of construction that people don't really think about. Usually we get hit up a lot talking about, oh, how do I build? How do I expand? How do I build this Airbnb or this structure?
Or,
really cool.
or they'll send a message with like a Zillow listing and they're like, hey, check this out. It's 18 acres and it's about 5,000 miles away from the nearest town. What do you think? And you're just like, okay, how do you respond to that? I don't want to break their heart because I know that they want the land. It's a cutie. It's a cute land, but yeah, it may not have utilities nearby. And it's again, LCSB, the budget side of it. You really want to be close to utilities, or else it's going to have drastic implications.
100%.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, even if the utilities are up until the property line, or even if there's a little driveway, you have to bring utilities onto the property where your build site is. So if that build site is a quarter mile or half a mile into your property and you're on a cliff, we're talking several hundreds of thousands of dollars just to trench and excavate power, water, sewage, or whatever to get to your build site. So don't just think because power's on the property line or at the street means that it's gonna be easy access. So that's something that's very important to consider is utilities. That usually has to go in poles for power, obviously, or you're trenching a 3-foot deep trench that has conduit and piping and sewage, depending on if you have city sewage or if you have a septic system.
Now, there is also the dream, because I know that a really big portion of the container world, the container community, they want to be off-grid, and they want to do solar panels, and they want to, completely just not live by, like, rules. The rules of the world. Utilities and all that kind of stuff, right? So that is possible. You can do solar panels, but again, that is going to really affect your budget, and you may not, a lot of lenders that I've talked to will not lend on a property that is fully powered by solar. They want it to be tied to the grid. Now, I don't think this is every single lender, but really my due diligence and over the years of trying to really get a project like this launched, solar panels really just kind of mucky up you can do solar panels in addition to power, but whenever you're trying to power the entire house with solar panels, you just really, it's kind of hard. It's an uphill battle. Same thing with like septic and digging a well. It's fine to do those things, but it's expensive, and you could easily spend $8,000 to $50,000, even more on a well, and you can dig super far into the ground and never actually hit water. Yep. And I've heard of people doing that, and I feel bad for them because it's like, what do you do? Yep. And you're just out. You could be out $50,000 because you never were able to tap into water. So you really want city utilities, if at all possible. Ideally. Yeah. Not necessarily a hard and fast rule, but if you're a budget conscious person, it kind of is. And then lastly, access ways. You got to get, you see all these Pinterest things, and like you see all the world's most extraordinary homes on Netflix, and you see these crazy container homes that are like in the middle of the Costa Rican rainforest or whatever, and you're like, how did they get that there? Yeah. You can't just get a container home, like, you can't just get it down a valley, right? You can't just get it into the middle, like 5 miles into a forest without spending serious cash. So you want accessibility at different parts of your property if possible.
100%. You got to be safe remember, eventually, whether you use it or you sell it to somebody else or you have guests, which we were talking about here, they have to feel safe and not fall off the edge of a cliff when they're driving or something. Ideally. Or get washed out by a rainstorm or something like that. So usually you have a 20-foot wide gravel or asphalt or paved driveway going in. You also got to remember, we're dealing with shipping containers. If you're doing multiple, even just one, but multiple, you have to crane them into place. And these aren't small cranes. And so you want to make sure that a crane can get in there, and cranes and vehicles, especially for lumber, steel, they can back up and get back out. So that's a huge thing that a lot of people miss out on. They have a perfect location, everything's great, but they forget about utilities and access ways, so the cranes and the crew and the utilities, or the trucks can get in and out. In and out.
And it's also expensive, right? So let's just say that it's halfway feasible to get your container halfway through your forest. One other thing to consider is your contractor is going to charge you more. Mm-hmm. All the laborers, all the workers, all the subcontractors and the vendors that have to go and, you know, deliver AC and tile and lumber and all that kind of stuff, they will charge you more to make that hike to your container. So just a few things to consider here.
It feels like we're kind of dogging on this whole process.
We're not dogging on it.
No, we're not.
We're just making it realistic, okay?
We want to make sure that you're aware, because a lot of times, like, especially what we're talking about, we're going to do a very unique unique type of build. And these are things that we actually have to think about. It's not just like a normal piece of land on flat dirt in the middle of the city. This is like, we actually have to put in some infrastructure
and some thought,
just to
some
start.
planning. Yeah. You see all these YouTubers out there that are like, let's tour my $8,000 container home. I'm gonna show you how you did it. All I did was use an angle grinder here. I threw some shiplap up, put some R8 bats in there, some R8 insulation, R8 batting. What is it? Tell me.
R8 insulation, the pink stuff?
Yeah. I put some R8 insulation in there. I covered it up with my shiplap again, several layers of shiplap. You can build a container home for $10,000 too. You could if you go unpermitted and you really, you know, if you went to like, what's it called, the Restore Habitat for Humanity store. Yep. If you went very basic on your finishes, you could absolutely have something, right? But if you want to be by the book and you want to build something that is permitted and you want something that appreciates and actually becomes a real live breathing piece of real estate, you kind of need to go through this whole process of getting your permits and getting the engineering done. And that's just expensive, you know, and a lot of the times it ends up costing more than, you know, a conventional house, or at least the same. But I don't know, what does that stack up for you most of the time?
Yeah,
okay.
100%. And like, the same thing, to echo what Rob just said, is that the building science of a shipping container is a little bit more, not a little bit more, has to be more precise. So you can't just put any type of insulation in there, because as many of you guys know, I've said this a lot, is that condensation and moisture is the worst enemy of shipping containers. You're in a metal box. So anything that you breathe in and out, the temperature difference, condensation is gonna occur. So if you just put bats in there, insulation bats, that pink stuff that you see at Home Depot, air's gonna get in there and you're gonna have a bunch of moisture just building up behind your walls. And so that means you have to 100% use spray foam insulation closed cell, which is the most expensive,
yeah, it's very expensive
type of insulation that you can buy. But with that said, when you build things right, soundproofed, super, super warm, airtight, there's not gonna be any type of water penetration. And honestly, if you design and you build it right, you build a lot of equity.
Oh, hold on. Before we move into this.
Sorry.
This is number 4. We're going to go to number 4, which is design. Okay. My little soapbox here is that I do want you to build this. So does Kai. We want you to have the container home of your dreams, but we also want you to consider that it's more expensive than... The marketing for container homes is really great.
Yeah.
But it can be expensive. All right. So with that, moving on to number 4... Design, all the aspects. And this isn't just how does it look, but it's also the technical and the construction design. Like Kai was saying, there's a lot of science that goes into making sure that you're allowing the moisture to seep in or escape properly, right?
Yep. So with the design is like, we want to make it aesthetically pleasing. Because remember, again, we're using just 40 or 20 foot steel boxes, and you want to make this look attractive. And so some people, they stack them on top, angles, all this other stuff. Legos. Yep. And then we want to make sure that we can add and create different types of designs. Like in my videos, you can see that I put a roof, it's called a butterfly roof, double slope like this, and it extends over so it looks like nice and proud and very cool looking. So it's more modern, contemporary, but that's part of the design that's both functional and makes it more pleasing to appraisers and people who want to buy in the future, that it doesn't just look like a standard shipping container, but it looks like a real home. And so we want to take all this stuff into consideration. And so that's why I recommend working with a trained designer, architect, or even a draftsman to put the design together, because you're gonna need it here in a second for both permits and then our next step. Okay?
Design, there's also a few more implications here, because I do see people wanting to build container homes and then they cover them up. You know, they cover up the inside, they cover up the outside, and you really can't tell that it's a container And you see it all over Instagram. You know, actually, Casita Conejo, my tiny house in Joshua Tree, shipping container like accounts on Instagram tag me all the time. They tag that house and they steal Levi's photos and they're like, do you like this container home? And then people are like, oh my gosh, it's a container. I'm like, no, it's obviously a tiny house. But I think the thing is, a lot of people will go through so much effort to make it look not like a container home a lot of the time. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I sort of think if you're building a container home, like, you kind of want it to look a little bit, like at least keep a wall in there or something like that, my opinion. But, you know, other last thing here with design, I think the tendency here is, okay, we like that it's a container home, but we want to change it up. So we're going to start carving out a bunch of windows. We're going to start stacking it. We're going to do doorways. We're going to take out the folding doors. We're going to do a giant piece of glass. And that, it looks beautiful. I agree. But the engineering on that, which leads us to step number 5 here, can really be pretty extensive, can be very expensive. Expensive, the double E's in construction. That's what we call it.
Yeah. So whenever you do this, you're absolutely right. Whenever you start cutting out holes or taking off doors, you start playing with the rigidity and the structure of the box that's already pre-engineered. And now that you're putting people to sleep in there and live in there, engineers in the county, if you guys remember, this is the prototype dwelling structure.
In 3,006 counties.
In 3,006 counties, exactly.
Which I knew.
That you're going to have to start putting in a lot of upgrades or steel structuring to make sure that it is still structurally sound. Now, with that said, you guys know right now, at this time, materials are freaking expensive.
Yeah, but steel's got to be pretty cheap,
Yeah,
right?
steel, metal.
Steel is the cheapest of all of them.
Perhaps super easy to work with, very inexpensive. No. It's the most expensive to both work with and to buy. If you guys go to a steel yard, go to Home Depot, go pick up a piece of steel and see how much it costs, and you need probably 100 to 1,000 times that amount. And so, depending on what you want to do. And so, it's very important during the design phase that you work with your draftsman and then obviously the engineer to make sure that you use as little as possible to still meet code requirements. Okay, so when you start doing big blowout windows and doors and you're blowing out like an entire sidewall of a container, just realize those are massive steel beams that you need to put in place to reinforce it. And that adds up very quickly because of the welder.
I was going to say because of number 6, but no, we're not there yet.
No, not number 6.
Well, so, hey, stop spoiling the welder. Well, what's up with you and your obsession with welders?
Sorry.
Jeez. So one thing here, I know a lot of people are like, yeah, but it's a container home. I thought that they were, engineered to hold like 100,000 pounds, blah, 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 blah. Technically, they are. I don't really know what the weight, do you know what the actual weight capacity of it?
I should know. I think it's like 96,000 pounds.
Okay.
It's written on the side of my container. I'm trying to remember. I think it's 96,000.
But I think the point here is that is whenever the entire structure is one piece, then yes, the 4 corners of that are meant to stack on other containers, and it is engineered to be that way. But yeah, the moment you cut a piece of steel in it, I'm not gonna say it buckles, but it's weaker.
Yeah, for sure. I've got just a quick example. We've cut out the middle before we reinforced it, and we literally saw the railing on top bend down. And it was not a big cut. It was just a normal window size. And so what we had to do is jack that back up and then reinforce it with the steel.
Dang.
And then, yeah.
That's crazy, just for a window.
Just for a window.
So design, we talked about implications and things to consider, like putting in a bunch of windows. But effectively you need a drafter or an architect who can design this. Because it really, I wouldn't say any drafter could do it. They could take a stab at it, but preferably you're working with someone who's done it before.
Right. And especially remember there's different draftsmen and architects that do different types of styles. They do Victorian, farmhouse modern, craftsman, or whatever it is that they do. You're going to be probably wanting to work with somebody who is modern contemporary, or specifically somebody who works with shipping containers, but a modern contemporary designer is probably going to be the best bet for you, so they understand how to use the sharp angles and the square boxes and everything like that.
And by the way, every draftsman that I've ever worked with has refused to do a container home. They're just like, I don't want to do it. So you always have to go and find someone that wants to do it.
Yeah.
So you get those plans drafted up, designed, planned, according to your liking, according to your budget, what you think it's going to cost and all that kind of stuff. And then you pass it on to number 5 here, engineering. We're back to we're going back and forth.
I feel like
it's a journey from forth, but they are. This is what we're talking about. They do really hurry.
Got it.
But this is what I'm talking about. A lot of this is parallel pathing, and you kind of are simultaneously designing it. Ideally, you have your engineer and your drafter working together because it makes the whole process a little bit more streamlined. But oftentimes you get them designed, then you pass off to your engineer.
Yep, exactly. Obviously, you want to work with an engineer that specializes in shipping containers, so they know everything. Certain engineers, kind of like what Rob was referring to, just like architects, they won't deal with it because they don't know how to deal with it, or they just choose not to. It's too risky for them. But it's pretty standard. There's already set schedules or set plans, engineering sets, and they just reinforce it. So it's relatively simple, but some engineers stay away from it. Definitely important to get though, because that structural engineering plan is going to be critical and required for any sets of permits that you're going to get for the county. They want to see the site plan, the design plans, which is done by the draftsman and the architect, and then the engineered plans, which is done by your structural engineer.
Well, I often also have counties where I'll call them and say I want to do like steel frame construction. Back when I did say like container homes, they usually say I don't care as long as your engineer like stamps it, and you're like, okay, cool, whatever.
100%.
So ideally 3 to 6 months to permit, but you know, I don't know. My tiny house village took like a year to permit, so you never really know how long something is going to take to permit. But 3 to 6 months, I think, is a good goal to set.
Because yours was a conditional use permit for that. This would be just in a lot of counties, it's just a standard building permit.
SFR, single family residence house. Yeah.
So that takes us into number 6.
Excavation, breaking ground, excavating, going into the ground and being like, "Hi, I like you."
So
that's what I do every time before every build. I'm like, "You wait, you hold the tractor." Hi.
Okay. So this is where it gets really exciting because now you're done with the paperwork, dealing with the county, and your piece of land is just sitting there untouched. You're bringing in bulldozers, excavators, skid steers, sometimes arborists to start removing trees and clearing out your build pad or your build area. And this is also when you're going to be able to start putting in your access ways, bringing in utilities, all that stuff that you need to do to prep the site.
Yeah, and this also implications here, right? If you go into a forest, this is something I dealt with a lot with the tiny house village that I was permitting. If you remove a bunch of trees, it can mess with the soil composition of the ground because the roots are no longer in there. It's not feeding nutrients into the ground, vice versa, all this. So it does require an extra engineer, like a geotechnical engineer, to come out and approve it, and I guess do like another like boring into the ground and testing the actual soil. This will sort of depend on your county, but for the most part, a soils test is something that I've come across pretty often.
That leads us to number 7, which is foundation, which is really coincides with excavation, because depending on the build site and what you're planning on doing from the previous two, design and structural, there's a lot of different types of foundations that you can use for shipping containers. Remember, it's already a pre-built modular home for all intents and purposes. But you can do pier, perimeter, and slab, flat slab. Those are the main ones. I'm sure there's some other ones I'm probably missing right now, but those are the ones. And depending on what you want to do and how your soil test comes back, you can have 1, 2, or maybe, I think, no, you can only really do 2. You can't do slab, perimeter, and pier. No, actually, maybe you can. But for me, well, in my project, I had to use all piers because the soil that I was building on was crap. Like literally, it was all fill and just bad stuff. I had to dig down, auger down between 6 feet, and the deepest one I think was 18 feet. Basically holes, and then we filled that up with concrete. Very expensive, a lot of rebar.
A lot of rebar, right?
But you cannot move this place now. Like it could get hit by a Category 5 hurricane and it would not move, or tornado. So it really depends on how you want to set up the foundation, which is critical to this whole project.
So let me ask you this. Is it preferable to do pier or perimeter because you can get under and address plumbing issues and stuff?
If I had my choice of it, I would choose perimeter because you have crawl space underneath it. It's way easier to run utilities. It's easier to insulate, and honestly, it's easier to pass code. In my area, it has to be enclosed for freeze issues and rodents, and so you can't have exposed wire down there, and then rodents can just go in and out. So perimeter is ideal, and a perimeter that has a crawl space of at least 3 feet. Just so you know, the little ones that you crawl through, those ones suck.
Very claustrophobic.
Yeah, I had to do pier because of the soil test. I'd stay away from slab because it's so permanent. If you guys don't know, you put all the utilities in and you pour a big old thick, like 5-6 inch slab, and then if you ever need to change something out, it's virtually almost
you
impossible.
got to crack into the foundation basically.
Yeah.
Number eight, crane it in, and your favorite.
Wow!
You did it! We arrived to welding. Oh my gosh!
All right, so now that you've excavated, you got the permits, everything's passed by engineering and the architect. it's time to bring in your shipping containers. Now, here is a little asterisk, because you can bring it in and start welding and do all the stuff on site, cutting it up, all that fun stuff that we'll talk about in a little bit. Or you can actually get prefab. So basically, it's already all done for you, all the cut ups and everything, and you just literally bring it in. Crane comes in, picks it up off the truck, sets it in place on the foundation, and then your welder comes in and they actually weld it in place. This is very big.
Which is your kind of your favorite thing.
It's not my
Do you stand behind them and just watch? Like,
I do.
Oh man, I'm really excited.
I am such a nerd when it comes to construction stuff. Like, I love learning, and welding is just you're freaking you're turning metal into liquid, and then you're using it to make this crazy tight bond. Do you know, like a
We
quarter?
have a crazy tight bond.
Yeah, we're kind of like a
Right here.
quarter-inch weld can hold up to, I think it's 5,000 pounds.
That's wild. Yeah, that's a lot.
Isn't that crazy?
For a quarter inch?
Quarter-inch can hold
That's
up
crazy.
to 5,000 pounds. So anyways, you have to weld it down for earthquakes. So basically, it can never shift. Things shift.
Especially if you're on the
Earth's
East Coast. Or sorry, especially if you're on the West Coast.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so if you choose to buy one of these prefab companies, it's an interesting way to call it prefab, because prefab for me is like a prefab house.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll call it, I guess like pre-manufactured, a pre-cut
There you go.
person. Okay, right, pre-cut company. When they send that to you, is it already engineered and all the rebars in there and it's structurally sound?
Correct.
Okay,
correct.
cool.
So a lot of times, if your county, one of the 3006, has specific requirements, they tell your engineer to redo certain steel sizes or beam or whatever it is, then obviously you have to pass that on to the company that's making or doing the pre-cuts and putting everything in to meet those requirements. But generally speaking, they've already ran the engineering. They know what the universal code or the international code is. But again, miles may vary. Is that what you say?
Yeah, your mileage may vary.
Yeah. So,
YMMV.
YMMV.
Yeah. It's very, YMMV. YMMV.
Love it.
You know I love my acronyms.
Yeah, love it.
I made that one up too.
So you just have to, they can do it, and it's safe when they do it. And it's also really nice because it's done inside a factory, which is way better than in the field with weather conditions and all this stuff.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let's just assume that you are not going to go the prefab route,
Yep.
and you just want to crane in a whole container. Do you go and basically crane it onto, let's say, piers or the perimeter,
Yep.
and then weld it and then cut? Does it matter what order you do that stuff in?
Yeah, you can, in theory, have all the cuts happen off-site, and then you
okay.
bring it in. So yeah, crane it in, put it in place, weld it in place, so it doesn't move, and now you're ready. You're in business.
There are a lot of sub-steps to this, right? We've just given you steps 1 through 8. You can assume that there's step 1 A, B, C, D, E, F, G for literally every single one of these, all right? There's no way that we could fully talk about how to design and build and permit and the whole process in in 10 minutes. Or 40,
Yeah.
whatever this is at.
We're at
It's
over
not
an
possible. But our hope here is that this at least gives you enough places to know where you need to start researching. And that's sort of the point here. So we acknowledge there's a lot of stuff that we're missing out here. Again, leave your comments. If you got them, we'll do a follow-up to this, no doubt. Like, I know that the container community is very passionate and there's just not a lot of information out there. So please, if you got questions, we'll clarify. Kai will spend the next 48 hours. He will not go to the bathroom. He will not eat. He will be glued to his computer answering all of your questions.
Perfect.
If you subscribe to his channel, please subscribe to Kai's channel, by the way.
Yes.
Kai Andrew, ding. And if you're here, it's like, if they're going to do that, they're going to have to click over to your channel and then subscribe. But I feel like it's fair to be like, just before you do that, subscribe to this channel.
Yeah, of
and
course.
then go to yours.
Yeah.
Because it would be kind of weird to like leave this video at this moment to go subscribe. So I'm like, open up a separate browser.
Separate tab?
Yeah, separate tab.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, number 9, we ready? Structural cuts. It's time to do the cuts inside the container now that's on the foundation. Now this is where things get really fun, that makes it super unique with shipping containers that's different than any other type of build, is that you need a plasma cutter, which I really don't like, but you can use it if you're good at it, or you use metal cutting wheels with a grinder. And you
How long does that take? Does that take a long time?
Forever.
Okay. But
Forever.
you don't like plasma?
I do not like plasma because I'm not good with plasma.
Okay.
And so it's you need a good hand, and you need to make it as straight as possible, and this just, it ain't. So I'm better with a grinder and a metal cutting wheel. You're making these cuts because now you're doing stuff for doors, windows, access ways inside the structure, or you're connecting two containers, so you're probably cut down a wall or something like that. And you need to make sure that you prop it up or you have it jacked up, because when you start making huge cuts, like I said earlier, it can bend in the middle. And so you gotta do this correctly, and you need the right type of person to help you cut the metal, work with the metal, and then put in the beams or the structural reinforcements that you need.
Yeah, I think that's pretty straightforward. I think a lot of people do combine stuff, and you're gonna need a beam really that runs across. You're gonna need do a lot of welding. If you're starting to stack stuff, it can get pretty crazy. So as much as I love the idea of doing like a vertical container home with like another one, and you're making a cross, and then there's like it's cantilevered over here, and then there's like another one we're standing up, and you make this crazy configuration. It's not necessarily, well, I don't know. I mean, some of that, I see concept art a lot. I don't actually ever see it out in the real world. And I'm like, yeah, that's beautiful, but the structural reinforcement that's needed to do that, like, it's very clear that the builds can be like $1 million plus, because it's expensive. It's expensive. The steel is expensive. The labor is really expensive. And one thing that we didn't even talk about was with the welding, your favorite subject. Your words, not mine. I think, I don't know, it might be my words at this point, but with the welding, when the inspector arrives and he's actually inspecting your job, they're really only going to be able to inspect things that are in their wheelhouse that are kind of pretty standard construction items, right? So electrical things, plumbing things, drywall, insulation. But with things like welding, oftentimes you need a specialized inspector to come out and sign off on the actual work, right?
Yep. There's an actual science and there's an art and science to welding. And so they'll check the structural welds, because this is considered, like I just said, structural welds. It's not just a normal weld for a toy or for something that you're using. It's actually holding something up and making sure that it doesn't snap, break, twist, or collapse. And so you need somebody to go through, sometimes even with what's it called, an X-ray, and they X-ray the welds to make sure
Really?
that it's
That's
done
crazy.
correctly. Yes, there's a certain type of thickness and no air bubbles, no gaps, and everything like that. So,
But if you want to impress them, you can say, yeah, excuse me, bub, I don't know if you know this, but a 1/4-inch weld can actually hold 5,000 pounds. So I don't know why you're inspecting this so much, pal. Okay, I know my stuff. And they're like, sorry, sir.
Yeah.
Are you raw built? I love your channel.
after all that, you're basically at the end of the shipping container specific stuff. There's a couple more other stuff when you put in doors and windows, but that's all relatively easy. But now it's just basic construction. You're running your, you frame it out. It's non-structural framing, so the 2x4s or 2x6s, whatever you choose to do.
You can do 2x2s as well? Don't people do 2x2s often to like, or is it not up to code if you do that? Or they do that so that they can save as much wall space as possible?
You can do that, but
or does it not really mesh well with like the insulation?
yeah,
thickness?
I wouldn't do that, because you still need to run, if you're putting plumbing and electrical in there, you don't have enough meat inside a 2x2 to actually drill through and run piping and vents and electrical.
Oh, got it.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
So I usually recommend 2x4, and really I've done it, and I actually have a gap between the wall and the furring, so it's just a ton of insulation, which is good in a shipping container. And then I have plenty of space to run all of my my utilities, electrical, plumbing, mechanical, all that stuff.
And even with that, I mean, if you're doing any kind of central air, you're probably going to still need to do like a soffit or something like that, right? I think a lot of the times with container homes, people will opt in for like mini splits, right?
Yeah, I do mini splits,
Yeah.
and then I do all exposed stuff. So my ceiling, ceiling's exposed, and we're just gonna paint it back black.
Okay, cool, nice.
So yeah, after that, it's just basic construction.
You're building a house.
Yeah, you're just building a house, bringing in utility
Easy.
guys.
So really these first 10 steps can obviously apply to a regular single family residence. Like some of these, not all of them, but really these are the 10 steps that you really need to pay attention to, because this is what really is going to dictate your whole entire build. If you can get to step 10, congratulations. It's a real feat to get there. It was expensive, probably. It took some time, some due diligence. And now you have to still build a house. You know, that part, you know, obviously if it's not you building it and you're hiring a general contractor, it's still going to be hard to manage if you haven't done it before. You're still going to learn a lot, but really learning that process of what it takes to build a new home from start to finish, whether it's a container or just a regular stick-built home, is going to be the most valuable lesson, the most valuable experience you could ever have in your real estate career.
Hey, really quick, Kai just launched an accounting firm and they specialize in short-term rentals. So if you're in the short-term rental space or you need any help with accounting, I can totally vouch for these guys because they're totally awesome. So if you want to book a completely free accounting and tax strategy session with Kai's team, I'm going to leave a link down in the description below where you can do that. Please make them regret giving me that link and completely fill up their calendar and let them save you some money on your taxes. Okay, now back to the video.
I don't know how to wrap this up, but
Real professional, just like that. Well, see ya. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, we'll end it there. Don't forget to go subscribe to Kai's channel. Throw me a subscribe if you like that. Hit the little notification bell if you want to be notified of our shipping container project journey that we're going to be going on over the next, who knows, 12 to 24 months. And you'll be notified every time it happens. You're going to be like, ooh, I see a container in the thumbnail. This can't be clickbait. I'm going to click it and watch it. Yeah. So anyways, and then also don't forget to go watch our other collab on this channel where this idea came to light at the very end, sort of organically. So anyways, if you have any questions, leave them down below. And feel free to follow us on Instagram, and we will never ask you for crypto. So, if you follow us on Instagram, there's going to be a bot probably that follows you back really instantly, and you might get excited, and then they're going to say, hey, how's your crypto portfolio going? And you're going to be like, it's fine, I guess. And they're going to be like, invest in this crypto portfolio. And then they're going to scam you because it happens, sadly, at this point. So we'll never ask you for crypto. But anyway, that's it. Container Homes 101. That's the mini masterclass on container homes.
bye.
Bye.